Welcome to The Dark Side with Verity, a podcast where we dive into all the real and raw transformations made possible through breathwork. We all have a dark side, but it doesn't need to be heavy. And this is why we share stories to bring in the lightness, to lift the load, so that we can all feel a little less alone and know that our stuff doesn't define us. And we move through this lifetime with more ease and grace. Let's dive right in. Welcome back to another episode with The Dark Side with Verity. We always begin with a breath. Let's settle in. This one we're going into the shadow side of healing as a business. So there's a lot of uncomfortable truths in the wellness industry, and I want to go there today. Close your eyes, get comfy. Settle into your space. Take a big inhale into the belly and let it go. Let your body arrive. Let it land. Let it be here and now in this present moment. There's a version in this industry that I love deeply, and there's a version that I genuinely get worried about. The version that worries me isn't really the obvious gripe. The fake gurus, the overclaiming. It's something more subtle and something honestly more pervasive. It's the way that healing has become content. The way that our worst moments have become our best performing posts. The way that vulnerability has quietly shifted from being a genuine act of courage, because sharing your story is, into being a growth strategy. Everybody's done it. And today we're going to talk about what it actually costs and where that fine line is. So how do we get here? The rise of healing in public era, I would say Brené Brown, the oversharing on the internet, the trauma-informed wave hitting mainstream, and then wellness hitting Instagram. Authenticity became our currency. Vulnerability became a competitive advantage, and the market rewarded it massively. And so it should. So being honest, open, and vulnerable does take courage. It created a genuine paradox. The more real you are, the more you grow. So being real became something people optimize for. The problem isn't that people share their healing. I'm all for it. The problem when sharing starts driving the healing rather than the other way around. When people almost look for something to have. Oh, I've got a spicy brain. I've got this now. I've got this now. Like, if you don't have problems prior, why are you now creating them? Just name the dynamic honestly. When you know a breakdown will perform well, something shifts in how you relate to the experience. And this isn't a moral falling. What happens when you build a personal brand inside an economy that loves attention, whilst also being human, trying to get well? Do you see what I'm talking about? It's almost like people then needed a hero's journey story. When if you're living and haven't had to experience huge big T trauma or have breakdowns in public, isn't that a really beautiful thing? And isn't that what we can normalize just by feeling good? Like, good is then the new norm. I think what happened is everybody saw the go deep, and then defining that deep process became performative. So it's the big releases that are filmed, the convulsing, the trembling, the huge breakdowns. And it's not fake healing. It's not conscious manipulation. It's just like this subtle drift where your processing starts happening for an audience rather than for yourself. And you don't want to get lost in this world. You want to heal, feel fucking amazing, and then have the tools if you need to use them again. But healing isn't your whole personality. I guess the tell is if you have an emotional experience and your first instinct is to reach for your phone, not to call a friend, not to sit with it and journal, but it's to document it, then your audience starts to shape your healing. So you unconsciously gravitate towards the narratives that land. Oh, this, I'm healing my feminine wound or whatever it is. It's almost that then your struggles are directed to the ones that are more viral or palatable, or you think your growth has to be relatable to your audience. So it's like, oh yeah, I'm just like getting better here, when we all know that that's not how growth happens. It's like this squiggly, weird back and forwards line. And then what gets left out is this unsexy, messy part, the messy, well, I suppose it does have a name now, the messy middle, that like, that doesn't need to be a lesson at the end, or that stuff doesn't resolve, or the stuff that just is hard with no redemption. And so when you build your brand around a particular wound or healing journey, there's this unconscious resistance to fully heal, because then who you are is maybe not the same as when you started, which is a good thing. But it's like, what do you talk about? I know that I put this podcast off for so long. So then when I had to start talking about my life, it was like going back 10, 12 years, 13 years. And that was weird, bringing it all back up again. But would I do it differently? Probably not, because the me after it happened, I was a mess and wouldn't have articulated much, to be honest. So I do think it's always the necessary path at whatever we choose. But it did, when I shared the first podcast, the first few episodes, it was taking myself back into that space. And like, I'd already done all that work, but I chose to share all this because I didn't have it when I needed it. So I trust that by me doing all this, it lands for people when they need. Then it makes it easier on me now, because there's nothing performative about telling my story. There's no, like, I'm at a place now where I'm 14 years on from grief. So it's very different to 1 or 2 years. And then I'm not attached to what someone says about my posts. So speaking of, the other day I posted a reel because there's lots of new audience and we're trialing different things with marketing. See? And they were like, okay, let's just do an intro post. Like, why did you start Vidya certification or Vidya breathwork to begin with? And so I shared my story. This guy commented, just another useless hoe sharing whinging or sharing a story. I don't know. It was very rude, but also didn't affect me to the point where I didn't delete it. I didn't take it down. I was just like, wow, I feel sorry for you that, and I actually shared about this, which normally I wouldn't. I just like block, delete, and get rid of it. But I actually shared it on my story because then my empathy comes out. Like, what have you been through that you hear about someone losing their partner and it triggers you to leave a nasty comment to hurt them? Like, that, to me, that's horrendous. You can see things and they trigger you and you just move past. But like, and this would be a man in his 50s. You've lived a long, obviously sad life if that's what you think was important to do with your time on that moment, on that day. So if you don't have that space in between, I think this is where it genuinely becomes dangerous to lay down your lens of pain that gets everybody to see you walk through your process. So I feel grief is different. Business, everybody wants to know what's happening and how you build a business, because that also is a very emotional journey. But I think it's definitely less, you're not going to stay stuck, because the purpose of building a business is you grow and you learn from your mistakes. Whereas if your business is built on your grief, and only that, it then can, I think, become something that stops you or keeps you stuck in that realm. So if you're always just honest about your experiences, even briefly, I feel this will be the most important part for you because learning to share your story is huge. It's part of the training with the facilitators. I want everybody to be able to share from a very authentic space without being triggered. So it means you have to deal with all your stuff first. It means you're not sharing from an open wound. And there's a difference between just sharing like a testimony or I've overcome this or I felt this and content, because a testimony comes from your healed space and a healing place that serves the listener, serves your audience. Because maybe you feel relatable when you're in your shit, but how is that helpful for someone? Is it all, we're all just going to wallow? You want to be a beacon of light and inspiration because like content can come from anywhere, especially if you're just serving the algorithm. But to be true to you and sharing your story, that's how this Dreamtime stories. This is how our whole world is built on stories that have worked for someone at some point. So don't you want your story to be one of those? Your hero's journey, whatever it is, and there's no level of one's more intense than the other. I mean, there is, but there is also isn't, because there's going to be different. Everybody's on a different path. So I guess the question to ask before sharing all the personal stuff, am I sharing from my experience or am I still in it? And let me kind of preface this. So when I spoke about the other day of I couldn't get out of my gate because the gate was broken and I was fuming. And so I was in it, but I was also watching myself, laughing at myself like, okay, I'm choosing now to sit in a huff and scroll on Instagram. And then I'm like, okay, now I'm choosing to go for a walk, but like a bit of a stompy walk. And then I finally chose to come and do breath work and cleared it. But in any of that, I could have changed the path, but I just had to laugh at myself and watch myself. So I was sharing from my experience, knowing that at any point, like I can change this. But when you're in it and you don't have that awareness, it's different because that's an unprocessed experience. It's, I guess, like risky for you because it can be destabilizing for your audience, especially if they're in a similar place. It's almost like permission for them to stay in it. And I know if you're growing your business in any capacity of healing or wanting to help people, that's not your goal. And so having practical responsibility when you share can help you with your content because your audience then feels important. They're close to you. And many of them would be in active healing. And so then what you model or what you share matters sometimes more than what you teach because you need to be practicing what you preach. Because appropriate self-disclosures in therapeutic or coaching context, the principle always translate to the context. So share what serves the audience, not what serves your processing needs. I used to share a lot of what are they called? Like memes, but like poetic quotes and if anyone was looking at my Instagram, they would know how I'm feeling because I'm sharing them, but they're mostly just for me. Was that helping my business? Not really. Were the quotes relatable to people in their stuff? Yes. However, I don't do that anymore. And I think because that's then their tools, the quotes, I guess, were tools for me to feel like I could relate to something else. And so rather than sharing other people's quotes, then sharing our story and our ideas and our perspective can have the same awareness and landing for your clients. Same when you're sharing client stories. So for me, sharing all of my client stories, I don't believe it's my job unless they give me permission. But do I think it's helpful for their healing to know that then as soon as they've worked with me, then I'm going to share their stuff? No. Like genuinely, it's not my stuff to share unless they say okay. And so then where becomes a line of like client confidentiality, social proof, exploitation. Like, did the client consent to being their pain to be your growth strategy? The like, I used to be a mess. I used to be 20 kilos heavier and now I'm this. It works in marketing, but I don't know. Does it? Because we all know it. Like this, like a story. You were this and now you're this. But I don't know whether it feels fully aligned to share other people's stories moving forward. Maybe I'm wrong. I can be. I just genuinely don't unless they've said please share. So it's working out what is real for you. Because when it's real for you, it will serve your audience. When it doesn't feel aligned, you'll feel in your body like, oh, this feels a bit ick to post. Then you need to know the difference between imposter syndrome and sharing what's out of alignment. Some things that you can feel in your body when you genuinely serve is like, okay, so it reduces shame for people because they thought they were alone in their experience. And so I think this is why community is really important. So on the app, there's a space and everyone can write in the community because it's a safe container and space. When your pain or your client's pain is processed enough, you're not asking the audience to hold something you haven't held yet. So, say with grief, when you tell people someone passed away, genuinely, if they haven't dealt with grief before, you end up supporting them. That's only like possible when you've done a lot of your own work. Well, it's not, you have to do it at the start genuinely anyway, but you learn how to do it in a way that really supports you at the same time. When you share and it has a genuine gift for the listener, not just calming for you or like sets you free. When it models healers as human, I think, which is one of the most important things in the wellness industry, and it needs more of. Because facilitators, I kept, there was like gurus before. And so then that's putting someone on a pedestal. But we're all human and nobody is better than one another. So the more human you are, the more helpful you're going to be. And when it stops helping people, it means you're using a public platform to avoid your private processing, which don't get me wrong, this podcast, I was like, am I sharing because this works for me? There's all a whole bleh, there's a whole content plan. But when the reaction is the actual goal, so more likes, more comments, more DMs, when your healing arc or when your healing becomes shaped by what your audience can handle rather than what's actually just true. Because then what you're playing God, oh, I'm only going to share this little bit now. They can't handle it. Says who? If it's facts, it's real life. And I say this because sometimes I question whether I should share what's happened in my life because it's can feel like too much for people to hold. Or there's too much different avenues of trauma experience that it's people just get overwhelmed. And then I'm then supporting them like, oh, sometimes I'll only say this little bit. You know, when it's not aligned, when you feel empty or violated after sharing. And there's a difference, like an emotional hangover because you're sharing something can just feel like, oh. But then there's difference where if you actually feel like, I mean, if you shared somebody else's story without their permission, like that's violation to me. Or when your clients or students are witnessing your active dysregulation and calling it authenticity. There's a difference when you haven't done the work. Your clients will feel that they are supporting you, and that is extremely not what we want. And the industry has a very low barrier to entry for sharing deeply personal and potential influential content about mental health, trauma, and healing. Like, there is a TikTok account, and people send him money so he can buy more bags or gear. And people are watching this guy go through active addiction and supporting it. And his poor mum is supporting him and trying to help him. I don't know how that the world is operating in that. Like, how can you then, why are people giving him money? I don't know. There was one the other day who was like selling his aircon and kitchen sink out of the apartment he was living in. So, like that, not okay. There's no ethics board. There's no supervision. Like anyone can be on TikTok. There's no framework for what's appropriate to disclose because we had no way years ago of sharing. It was just the news on TV, and then the social media came out, and now anyone and everyone can share. And so where is the, I guess, barrier when you're potentially influencing hundreds of thousands of people that are in active healing and then over claiming a problem like I healed my anxiety, I healed my autoimmune disease, my trauma all through breath work, I healed my grief. They're big claims and a lot of them are true. It makes it sound like there's no work involved sometimes. And I think then people see almost like a pressure to have this clean, dramatic healing narrative. So breathwork alone did not heal my grief. It healed more in 10 minutes than in 10 years. And that's why I had this big epiphany of like, why the fuck have I not done this earlier? Why didn't I know how to feel my emotions? And so that, if I'm making a claim, I guess that's the claim. But there's like reset your nervous system in 7 minutes. There's science that shows that it's 20 minutes for 14 days in a row. For me, I would say with our day and age, this should be every day. 20 minutes in this position, breathing. So then we think, oh, I should be able to reset my nervous system in 7 minutes. Why hasn't it happened? Or I should feel better, but I don't. This is shit, doesn't work. A breathwork session is one piece. That's why as a facilitator, you need to be able to coach your clients. You need to have integrative tools. You need to read a nervous system. You need to know how to explain the entire body and system to your clients so they have something tangible that they can work with. Because you want to teach them. You don't want the same clients coming to you week after week. That's not the whole point. It's to teach them to have the power back and have the tools. With sharing your story, I make it a really big, almost like practice sessions in our training to share your story because you don't want unprocessed bits to come flying out. Because most regulated, boundaried, ethically grounded practitioners sometimes have the least dramatic content and get outperformed by people who are bleeding publicly. Like, look at TikTok. I'm in this like push and pull to get back on there because it's so, must be my algorithm, but there's so many people in active addiction on there. And is it helpful for them sharing their life, their content they want? Then they're sober for this amount of time and then they relapse and then they've got to show up again or do they feel too much shame? It's a whole new world to navigate sharing socially. And I guess how to do it differently. Because I think giving myself enough time in between experience is definitely helpful. It doesn't have to be forever, but until you've processed it enough, rather than being it a place to outsource from your audience, like you've connected your worth to your audience's comments and likes. I think maybe a service filter. So before you post anything, regulate, process, have some questions that are aligned with you. Is this going to serve my audience? Would I still be okay if nobody responded if I shared this? So it's worth working out, especially when it comes to your story, what you're okay with sharing and what you're not. You definitely do not have to share everything. Your life is yours and it can be as private as you want it and still have a brand and business. With all of this, it's important to have a support system where you're processing that's not in public. A therapist, a supervisor, a breathwork facilitator, a group of facilitators, a community. Your audience is not your processing container because that creates too many attachments. And separate your healing from your brand. I love not sharing my story, as wild as that seems, because I talk about it in the podcast. Your brand can be informed by it, and I definitely don't share everything. It just then becomes shaped by it because you know how to overcome and move through processes. Now, with all AI, it's important to audit your content and then look back on what you've shared and ask honestly, was it processed when I shared it? It's okay if it's not. We're all human. We're all learning. Did it serve my audience at that time? And then model integration, not just struggle. Like teach people the tools and the things that work. Because if you're just having a big breakthrough, breakdown every time and it's dramatic, how is that helpful? It's just reenacting that it's okay not to heal, basically. So I'm not saying don't share. I'm all about sharing because I believe sharing your story is one of the most powerful things we can do as humans. I'm not saying it needs to be polished or perfect or hide how you feel. I think that's super important. I just, for your sake, share from a place when you're resourced enough to hold both you and your audience at the same time. And know the difference when you're sharing from a place of true authenticity and you know it's going to serve your audience, it will definitely land that way. If you're sharing from a place and you haven't checked in prior that you're just having a vent and a dump, is that helpful to everybody that you care about? Probably not. You can do that in different platforms and different scenarios with friends, family, loved ones. And you're allowed to get well. You are allowed to feel good and still have something to say. In fact, that might be the most radical thing that you can model. How you healed and feel good and show up every day doing your best to be happy and being happy. Be happy. Ciao. That is a wrap of The Dark Side with Verity. Thank you for joining and being here to support our guests as they move, shift, and share through real transformation, sharing their stories from the darkest of places, allowing you to see their light. This is where the change will happen. You know the drill. Like, share, chat about it, connect with us. We're here for more, and you know it.